They laughed when the black CEO walked into the bank, treating him like a man who didn't belong among marble counters and glass walls. But when a careless teller scattered his hard-earned money on the floor, no one could have predicted what would happen the next morning. Stay with me until the end of this story, you won't believe how justice unfolded. And before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because stories like these are too powerful to miss. The morning sun spilled over the tall skyline of the city, catching on the glass towers and steel edges of ambition that filled the air with restless energy. Jonathan Reynolds adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped out of his black sedan, the driver holding the door respectfully. Jonathan wasn't just another man in a tailored suit, he was the CEO of Reynolds Global Enterprises, a company that had clawed its way into the ranks of billion-dollar empires under his relentless leadership. At 51, he carried himself with the discipline of a man who had survived storms that would have drowned others. Yet despite his success, Jonathan carried scars. He remembered the lean years when no bank would approve his small business loan, when investors ignored his proposals, and when he worked late into the night at a desk cluttered with bills. He remembered the dismissive looks, the subtle racism, and the way doors seemed to slam shut faster for him than for others. But he had persevered, and now, as one of the city's most successful black CEOs, he had the wealth and influence that many once claimed he would never achieve. That morning, Jonathan walked into Westbrook National Bank, a historic institution with marble pillars and chandeliers hanging above polished floors. He needed to move a substantial sum of money from one account to another, part of an acquisition his company was preparing. Inside, the line was short. Customers murmured, clerks tapped away at their keyboards, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. Jonathan stepped to the counter when it was his turn, offering a polite nod to the young teller. The teller was a man in his late 20s, clean-shaven, with a thin tie and a nervous energy. His name tag read, Ethan. Jonathan greeted him courteously and handed over the paperwork along with the cashier's check that represented millions. Ethan looked at the amount and his eyes widened slightly. Then, with a smirk he didn't bother to hide, he muttered under his breath, "Yeah, right." Jonathan heard it. Years of boardroom negotiations had sharpened his ears for tone, sarcasm, and disrespect. Still, he remained calm, standing with his shoulders straight as Ethan began processing the transaction. When it came time to verify and count part of the deposit, Ethan's hands fumbled deliberately. Bills spilled onto the floor, scattering like fallen leaves. Some fluttered across the polished marble tiles, landing near the feet of other customers who stared in shock. "Oops," Ethan said with a chuckle, though there was no real apology in his voice. "Guess I'm a little clumsy." The humiliation was intentional. The way he looked at Jonathan, as if daring him to bend down and pick up the money himself, made it clear. A few people snickered quietly, the sound echoing like hammers in the cavernous hall. Jonathan didn't flinch. He bent down, not with the desperation Ethan expected, but with the quiet dignity of a man who knew his worth was not measured by a bank teller's prejudice. He picked up the bills carefully, stacked them with precision, and placed them back on the counter. Looking directly at Ethan, Jonathan spoke in a voice calm enough to cut through the room. "You should be more careful with other people's money. One mistake can shut down an entire bank." The words hung in the air like a prophecy. Ethan forced a laugh, dismissing him. "Yeah, sure. Have a nice day, sir." Jonathan completed his transaction, took his receipt, and walked out. But as he left, his mind was already moving like a chess player plotting 5 moves ahead. He had seen enough. This wasn't just about disrespect, it was about an institution that had failed its duty. And Jonathan Reynolds was not the kind of man to let such failure go unanswered. That night, while the city buzzed with neon lights and traffic, Jonathan sat in his study overlooking the skyline. He poured himself a glass of wine and opened his laptop. His fingers typed with deliberate precision as he pulled financial records, regulatory reports, and data that most people would never think to look for. Jonathan had built part of his fortune by understanding systems better than those who ran them. And what he found in Westbrook National Bank's public filings was more than negligence, it was scandal waiting to be exposed. The numbers didn't add up. Loans were overleveraged, reserves were lower than required, and suspicious transfers traced through shell companies hinted at corruption within the upper management. Jonathan's mind raced. He thought of Ethan's smirk, the money scattered like trash, and the disrespect dripping from every word. But more than that, he thought of the countless ordinary people who trusted that bank with their savings, their mortgages, their dreams. Jonathan called a trusted contact in the state's Financial Oversight Commission. "There's something you need to see," he said. His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. He sent files, spreadsheets, and flagged transactions. Then he made another call, to a journalist who had been chasing corporate scandals for years. By midnight, Westbrook National Bank was no longer just a marble hall with chandeliers in Jonathan's memory. It was a target. The next morning, news broke like a storm. Reporters camped outside the bank's entrance. Government officials arrived with documents, seizing files, freezing accounts, and questioning staff. Customers who came to withdraw their money were turned away, panic rising as whispers spread that the bank had been shut down for investigation. By noon, Westbrook National Bank's doors were locked, and its reputation lay in ruins. Inside his office, Jonathan watched the news unfold on a large screen. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. He simply leaned back in his chair, remembering Ethan's laugh, the scattered money, and the prophecy he had spoken: one mistake can shut down an entire bank. And he had been right.